All right, Austin Price, let's talk some recruiting here as the evaluations of May continue to roll on and we get ready to start welcoming a bunch of guys to campus for official visits. They've got the big Memorial Day weekend bash or I don't know what we're calling it. It's just going to be a
Um,
bunch of recruits in that weekend, AP.
that's
So
right.
let's talk a little recruiting. Where are you at with stuff right now?
Well, I think Tennessee is in a good spot as we enter the middle part of May, and I still think there can be some noise this month. We'll see. And then after that, I mean, I think a lot of these official visits will happen in June. I think you might see one, two guys pull the trigger in June. I think most people are going to see them in July because you're going to get through the official visits in June, and if you don't pull the trigger that last week of June, then July will be your target date, much like it was a year ago across all the recruiting landscape. Is July is going to be that that trigger month, and so again, I think Tennessee's trying to figure out what they want at linebacker. You saw Bodie Cahoon come off the board, as I said on the board on Monday. I mean, Bodie Cahoon was somewhere between 4 and 6 on the pecking order. Tennessee's not willing to take any linebackers at this time. Bodie Cahoon did not want to wait and potentially, not have a spot here and lose a spot at Notre Dame. And so there was no point to take official visits. Go ahead and lock in your spot at Notre Dame, and he's comfortable there. Tennessee at linebacker, you look at Edwin Spillman, Sammy Brown, Jordan Burns, Tylen Singleton, Chris Cole. All of those are kind of that to me like top 5, not in any particular order. I just named them how I thought of them in my brain. Then I mean, Tennessee's trying to figure out where they're at on the offensive line. They need to add tackles, and what's that look like? Did they get an official visit for Brandon Baker? I think they will. But I mean, that's a kid from California. Tennessee's had some success pulling kids out of California over the years. They'll continue to swing out there, especially with Joey Halsley's ties, being a California native. Elsewhere, Max Anderson, William Satterwhite, Ethan Callaway, all guys that Tennessee's going to try to land along the offensive line. We'll see if they have any success there at all. At running back, Peyton Lewis continues to have a lot of momentum with Tennessee. Does he take his official visits in June? We'll see. And I still think Braylon Russell is going to factor here. I think that when coaches have went out and been able to evaluate him this spring, they have found someone who, yes, is 245 pounds, but moves like a 220-pound back. And that's very intriguing when you can get size with super athleticism.
Who is not the most important? That's not fair. Give me a couple of guys who it's imperative they get them in town for either the last weekend or they get them in town for a visit here to be in it. Is it Russell? They got to get him in town.
No, he's coming back. I mean, he's going to officially visit in June.
Okay.
I mean, if you're looking at just the running back position, Daniel Hill, he's this year's version of Noel Rogers.
Right. We haven't seen
South
him.
Carolina. He's been there quite a bit. For me, it's him. Outside of that, I think getting Jaden Riddell in here Memorial Day weekend, getting Jonathan Eccles back. I mean, that tight end spot is super important. We've talked about how Abe has connected with these kids, but again, there's a difference between building a good rapport and relationship with them and actually landing them. And I think for him, he was always to me set up to fail with Jonathan Eccles, and yet to this point has been able to hold on to him, which is a good sign because Eccles was flirting hard this entire time. Then you got Jaden Riddell, down to 10. To me, it's Tennessee, Georgia. He's going to officially visit both the month of June. He's going to unofficially be at Georgia this coming weekend and then back to Tennessee for Memorial Day weekend. And then we'll see him I'll see him at the On3 Elite Series NIL event over in Nashville at the end of the month. So, that tight end position is important, but at the same time, like, again, there's a difference between building a rapport and relationship and then actually getting them in the boat or keeping them in the boat in the case of Jonathan Eccles. So, that's going to be kind of Abe's challenge between now and maybe the first week of August is, you're going to see some of those dominoes fall. If he can land a Riddell, hold on to Eccles, that's a really good sign for him as a recruiter. Not that it's a bad sign if you don't. Again, I think he was set up to fail in a lot of ways just because He wasn't out on the road in January. He's not, hadn't been on the road at all until spring evaluations. And here he is now out there on the road. And then again, connecting well with kids. But, it's a dog eat dog world in this SEC.
All right, let me ask all you guys this question. Big picture here. Austin's talking about official visits. We're seeing a lot of official visits in the month of June. A lot of guys are going to make decisions. We will not get into the topic of an early signing period in September 1 or August 1, considering, half the country makes a decision in the summer now. That's a topic for a different day. But there is this, and I don't think it's gotten a ton of play nationally, that kids could take an unlimited number of official visits. There's no longer 5. You can take as many as you want to take. So my question is, do you think kids will be taking 8, 10, 12 official visits? And 1, and 2, if you're a school, Rob Lewis, how do you handle the fact that you're not fighting for one of somebody's 5 visits? You can get a visit. How do you determine how much do you have to put into the fact of, hey, do we want to wait? It's not because they still have a number. Do you waste a visit on a kid? Because any kid can come visit you now. You're not fighting for one of the 5.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see a ton of kids take 10 or 12 visits. I mean, there'll be a few. There'll always be exceptions. I mean, you guys know. I mean, a lot of these guys, when they're freshmen or sophomores, can't wait, to get recruited. Can't wait to start, getting noticed and have to get the phone calls and texts from coaches. And then by the time, a year and a half later, they're done with it. So I don't think you'll see a lot of guys that get to double digits. But I do think the bigger question is the second thing you mentioned, Brent. How are programs going to judge whether or not to, are we wasting a visit on this kid? Do we want to be one of 8 instead of, one of 3 places that he's checking out? And at places like Tennessee, where budget is not a concern, I think you probably have a more liberal stance on that. But there's going to be some programs where, the budget does factor in. Are you wasting a visit? I don't know that many of those programs are in the SEC, but out there in college basketball, out there in college football somewhere, that will be a concern. But I'm always pro athlete, so I'm kind of like it, and it helps kids, especially who maybe commit, coach and change, decommit, and how many official visits do you have left to take if you used 4 of them in the fall to see the school you eventually picked?
Yeah, for me, I think Rob's right. I think you're going to see. It won't be a big percentage of people that take 12 official visits. Now, do I think you end up getting several kids that get 6 or 7? Sure. Because sometimes there is that bleed over. Like, I really like that team, but it's a fringe top 5. Now all of a sudden he can go see option 5B or 5C or whatever you want to look at it as. I think the other thing too is you'll see it a lot with kids that just have kind of crappy home lives, and they can get out for a weekend and go to a school. I think that opens that up quite a bit for kids that are, again, that don't have the best home life.
Grant, coaches think they can get everybody, right? I mean, you get them on campus, you can get them. So where's the coaching balance of, yeah, we don't need it because they only got 56 unless they're rolling some over. And we'll see when the NCAA ruling comes out exactly how many Tennessee has to deal with. They may have to balance it more than some other schools. But where's that balance as a coach of we can get anybody if they come to campus versus, look, let's just be realistic here. This is a trip just to take a trip.
Realistic is the key word, I think. I think priority is the key word on both sides. I think you better know who you're prioritizing, and I think you better know who's prioritizing you, and not wasting your time and not just getting to your campus just to get out of town and take a visit. I agree with Rob and AP that, there will be more kids that take more than 5, but 10 to 12 sounds tiring to me and almost a little bit overkill in terms of visits and almost paralysis by analysis unless you just want to be traveling, unless you just want to be out on the road. I think it does help kids to get those few more than 5. I don't know what the number is, 6, 7, 8, something like that. But I think from the school side of it, with, their visits are unlimited, your visits are still limited. You better know who you're prioritizing. You better know who's prioritizing you, and you better be realistic in who you think you can get and not take a ton of chances on completely, out of left field. You better not be naive in this process and know who you have a realistic shot with before you bring them on campus.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting debate for sure as to see how that plays out. Again, I don't think this topic has generated a ton of buzz, which tells me there's not a lot of people kind of freaking out about it. You know what I mean? Schools aren't necessarily going bananas over it, and I don't think kids have talked about it. I don't know that there's a kid who's got 6 scheduled right now. So I don't know that it's going to be that big of a deal ultimately when it's all said and done, because you got a calendar thing that you got to deal with too. I mean, these kids got to go through their high school senior seasons. It's hard to leave on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, get somewhere and see some teams play. There's only so many weekends in the month of June that are available for you. So from a calendar standpoint, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do more than 5 visits when it's all said and done. But I do think the idea of having the ability to go see some places during the fall, if there's a coaching change or something's going on at a place that you thought you were heading to, it's not necessarily a bad thing, particularly when you're using so many visits on the front end.